You know that creepy-looking mask with the long beak? The one that looks like something out of a nightmare? That's a plague doctor's mask, and behind it was a man people once trusted with their lives. But what if I told you one of those doctors didn't come to save lives, but to study death? Centuries ago, a mysterious figure appeared in a town crushed by the Black Death. No one knew his real name. No one knew where he came from. But after he left, people started finding things, horrible things, a sealed room, a hidden journal, strange drawings, missing patients, and one terrifying question: what exactly was he doing behind that locked door? This is the story of the plague doctor's secret. To really understand this story, we need to go back, way back. Europe, the 1600s. The streets were quiet, not because it was peaceful, but because almost everyone was either dying or already dead. The Black Death, the plague, had turned cities into ghost towns. Families vanished overnight. People were terrified to even open their doors. And in the middle of all that fear came the plague doctors. They wore long black coats, leather gloves, and that now infamous mask with the bird-like beak. But that mask wasn't just for show. It was packed with herbs and spices, meant to protect them from the bad air people thought caused the disease. They were hired to record deaths, examine the sick, and sometimes perform desperate treatments. But here's the thing: medicine back then? It was more guesswork than science. Bloodletting, cutting open boils, even burning herbs. Anything was worth a try. Most of it didn't work. And when people are desperate, they'll trust anyone who looks like they know what they're doing. Which brings us to him, the doctor at the center of this story. He arrived quietly, treated patients quickly, but when he disappeared, the real horror began. They called him the Raven, not because of his name. No one ever knew that, but because of the way he looked, tall, silent, always cloaked in black, and that long beaked mask, like the bird that watches from above just before death comes. He arrived in a small, plague-ridden town somewhere near what's now northern Italy, a place already half swallowed by death. But something about him felt different. He didn't speak much, kept to himself. He never asked for money. Just showed up, went door to door, and treated the sick. And strangely, some people actually got better. But the way he treated them was unlike anything the townsfolk had seen. He'd lock himself in with patients for hours. He carried strange tools no one recognized. Herbs that didn't grow in that region. Bottles with no labels. And then the disappearances started. At first, it was brushed off. People were dying left and right anyway. But then, it was a merchant. Then a young boy. Then an entire household. No bodies, no funerals. Some said they'd seen a figure in black near the forest late at night. Others swore they heard screams from the old church where he'd been staying. And then, just as suddenly as he came, he vanished, gone without a trace. But what he left behind was much, much worse. Weeks after the doctor disappeared, the town thought the nightmare was over. But then, the smell started. Coming from the old church at the edge of town, the one he'd turned into his home and clinic. At first, no one wanted to go inside. But eventually, a few brave souls pried open the heavy wooden doors, and what they found still haunts local legends to this day. Inside, the air was thick and rotten. The pews were covered in dust and dried herbs. Bottles lined the altar, some still filled with dark, thick liquids, and in the very back, behind a hidden panel in the wall, they found the room. It was small, cramped, lit only by the cracks of sunlight sneaking through the boards. But the walls were lined with pages, drawings, notes, symbols that looked more like rituals than medicine. In the center, a table, stained, scarred, burnt in places, and laid out across it. Pieces of things, not whole bodies, parts, preserved in strange oils, tagged with initials. Some were human, some, maybe not. There was a journal, too, bound in old, cracked leather. Inside were pages filled with tightly packed handwriting, not just treatments, but experiments. One passage described how he would expose healthy patients to different stages of the plague, just to see how their bodies reacted. Another spoke of transference, the idea that suffering could be moved from one host to another. That if he could isolate pain in its purest form, maybe he could control it. Some pages were written in Latin, others in something no one could recognize, almost like code or a forgotten dialect. And then, the drawings. Distorted human figures, circles within circles. Anatomy crossed with symbols you'd expect in a spell book, not a medical journal. One image in particular stood out. A human heart, surrounded by thorns, with a beaked mask sketched faintly in the background. Someone had circled it, twice. This wasn't just a doctor. This was something else. A man who saw the plague not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity, and whether he was trying to cure death or become something beyond it, no one could say for sure. Now here's the question. Did any of this really happen? Some say no, that it's just a legend passed down through frightened whispers, a ghost story born from centuries of disease, fear, and superstition. But others believe there's more truth here than we'd like to admit. You see, plague doctors were rarely trained professionals. Most were volunteers, criminals, or outcasts, paid to do a job no one else wanted. Records were messy, if they existed at all. And in that chaos, people could disappear without a trace. Experiments could be hidden. Secrets could survive for centuries. There are even scattered mentions in European archives, brief notes about a masked physician who was relieved of duty after conducting inhumane procedures. No name, no trial, just gone. Some historians point to these as proof that someone like the Raven could have existed. That maybe, just maybe, the story is based on a real person whose actions were covered up, erased from the official narrative. There are even reports, decades later, of similar journals surfacing in private collections. Pages that match the drawings, the symbols, the theories. But every time one is found, it mysteriously vanishes. So was the plague doctor's secret a real buried chapter of history? Or just the imagination of a terrified world trying to explain the unexplainable? Whether the story of the Raven is fact, fiction, or something in between, it tells us something important. That even in the darkest times, when death was everywhere and answers were nowhere, people still searched for meaning, for control, for power. It's easy to look back and think of the plague as just a tragedy, but underneath the fear, there were people experimenting, observing, even crossing lines they never should have touched. And maybe that's what makes this story so haunting, because it's not about one masked man. It's about what happens when we push too far, ask the wrong questions, and convince ourselves we're doing it for the greater good. The Black Death may be long gone, but the secrets it left behind, some of them are still waiting to be found. So what do you think? Was the Raven real? A twisted genius lost to history? Or just a legend, born from fear? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your theory. And if you enjoy dark history, hidden truths, and mysteries that make your skin crawl, hit that subscribe button. I've got more secrets to uncover. Pause. because sometimes history doesn't stay buried forever. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and stay safe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.